Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Welcome to the Catholic Mama, where you'll learn how to deepen and defend your faith, find comfort as we share the vocation of parenthood, and learn how to raise your children confidently Catholic. I'm your host, Christine Mooney-Flynn. Let's get started. Welcome to the Catholic Mama, where you'll learn how to defend your faith, find comfort as we share the vocation of parenthood, and learn how to raise your children confidently Catholic. I'm your host, Christine Mooney-Flynn, and on this, our inaugural podcast, I am joined by a very special guest, my husband, Pat Flynn, who is the host of his own podcast, The Pat Flynn Show, which covers business, philosophy, fitness, faith, and much, much more. Hello, husband.
Well, hello. That was a very nice introduction. I'm impressed. That was quality. I'm excited.
Oh, you're good.
I'm excited to listen to this show, and I hope I don't disappoint myself.
Well, you're a bit more of a veteran to podcasting, so I think we're going to do okay.
Yeah. So, the Catholic Mama.
Yes, the Catholic Mama. This actually started. The idea for this started a few months ago. And now here we are doing the podcast. Finally, we've been talking about doing this particular podcast. We've been talking about doing for quite a while, and now we're recording it. I'm very excited. Mm-hmm. Pat and I, we were married about 2014. So 4-ish years ago. And it was just this.
I'm not going to be able to fact check you on that.
That's okay. I'm only remembering because somebody gave us a sign at our wedding saying, founded the Mooney-Flynn or Flynn household founded, whatever. And we were married, it was very secular. A friend of ours was ordained online and married us. And we, over the course of the past few years since we've been married, we've had 3 kids, and we kept going back and forth saying, there's something, I feel like we need to get our souls right. And it inevitably, after much research and discussion and more research, and then also just that leap of faith, realizing that we were Christian, and beyond that, the place that we found the most truth was in Catholicism. So, we're in our 20s and 30s. We are converts. Pat, you can talk about this in a few minutes, but you were raised mildly Catholic there for a while. I was not quite as the Catholic Church was the default because my extended family was Catholic, but the environment, the everyday environment that I was in, the friends that I had, it was just definitely not Catholic. So, since we've converted, we've had quite a few people ask us why, especially I learned the term, the cradle Catholics. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what that was, but cradle Catholics, born and raised Catholic, just have always been this way. They were so curious to see why would 2 people who were young adults with kids suddenly want to become Catholic of all things? And in the meantime, we also realized that a lot of people were unable to say why they were still Catholic. And maybe even were a little bit embarrassed that they were religious at all. So as far as the Catholic Mama goes, we'll explore some of those themes over time. But tonight this episode, we wanted to talk about our own conversion story. So just a brief background on myself. I touched on a little bit. My extended family is Catholic. My parents were raised Catholic. My dad in particular had a very particularly religious upbringing. And as soon as he could, he got away from it and didn't really look back. So I always, this is all nonsense. Very agnostic at the least. He's agnostic, or at the most, I'm not sure. You've got to show me is his motto. His name's Thomas, by the way. So we always kind of joke. My mom always called him Doubting Thomas, which is fitting. So I had my dad, just saying, no, this is all bunk, don't listen to it. And then I was raised in the South, and 30 years ago, about when we moved there, I was a Northerner moving to the South, which was still very insulated. It's very different now. As the years went on, I barely knew anybody who was a born and raised Southerner. But at the time when I showed up, it was just very insulated. And so it was the middle of the Bible Belt, and, sleepovers would end in tears and fights because of who was going to be taken up in the rapture. And it was so ridiculous. We had the mom running downstairs threatening to send us all home if we couldn't just get along a little bit. But, these just ridiculous fights. And so my first glimpse of Christianity was fighting over who was going to become a slave of Satan. That's the rapture game. And then my dad telling me it was all bunk. And I was like, well, okay. I think I'm going to side with my dad on this one because what I'm seeing sounds ridiculous. The years went past, I would go to Catholic churches because my extended family would, and I just wanted to go. And I remember saying this to you. I was like, sometimes I go just because I like to hear the words. I had no understanding of what any of it was, but it all sounded nice.
Sure. There's certainly an intrinsic beauty to the church, even, which, again, many of my friends who are not religious at all, they are very... I wouldn't say quick to admit that, but many of them do admit that.
Yeah. And even, I would wind up at Catholic churches, speaking of beauty, because they were so beautiful, typically, and who doesn't want to be surrounded by anything but beauty? So I would go to Catholic churches because that was kind of like the default. But even then, I didn't understand. It seemed too formal. What was all this pomp and circumstance? I don't understand it. It feels like they're not letting me have access. I feel like it felt like a middleman. And so anyway, years went on. I struggled with feelings of mediocrity. Why am I special? Am I special? And I remember at one point, it was after our first child was born. I was like, I don't feel special. What am I? And you, Pat, had said, no, you are special. But at the time I thought, but why? Why? Because we were pretty atheist at that point. Why would I be special? There's nothing. There was nothing beyond. So
right.
what?
You were a very good, consistent atheist.
That's right. Just miserable. I was miserable.
We're not saying that atheists have to be miserable. You just have no reason not to be.
Right. Yeah. If there's nothing better or nothing to work towards, then what does this all matter?
That's what Nietzsche found out.
Yes. God, so depressing. No, again, you don't have to be depressed to be an atheist or vice versa, but it just didn't make me feel very good. And we kept talking about it, we need to get our souls right. There's something, we should do something. And Pat suggested going to church, and I immediately balked at it because, again, my upbringing was, you don't need that middleman. It's all crazy. Yeah, the rapture. Just the rapture.
There was baggage.
There's just baggage. Absolutely, there's baggage. And we talked about this for a couple of years. Years went on. We talked about doing this, and just complacency, and the feelings would subside, and everything was fine for a little while. But then that tug would keep coming back. And we were walking one night, and you suggested a couple of churches. Like, I'll find a church. We'll go Lutheran. That seems safe. It's not Catholic. We're not going Catholic. And you said, no, let's do an open mind. I was like, I don't need to keep an open mind. I know what I know. We'll go, but I guarantee you there is no way in hell that I am ever going to accept Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior. And about a month later, I realized I was Christian. After a lot of studying, I did go in with an open mind, despite how I presented my thoughts to Pat that night. I did go in with an open mind and realized that I believe that Christ is who he says he is, that all of this is true. We watched the Catholicism series while we were going to the Lutheran church, because we went there for about 2 months, maybe. We started watching the Catholicism series that Bishop Barron produced with Word on Fire, and it explained Catholicism so well that I realized that I do believe in Christ, and I also believe in Catholicism.
Yeah. Well, congratulations.
Thank you. Yes.
Welcome home.
Thank you. Yes. Well, welcome. You're not even home, because this wasn't even a home that I knew of.
Well, it's still welcome home.
And then thankfully I jumped into the RCIA process with enough time that I was able to get baptized at this Easter vigil. So And we got our marriage blessed.
That's right.
And I can I can participate in the Eucharist, and it's wonderful. And now I get to look forward to continuing the RCIA process. I really did enjoy it, and I get to go back this coming school year so that I can become confirmed at next Pentecost in 2019.
Yeah.
So.
Good. And I will be getting confirmed in 4 days, 3 days, something like that.
Very exciting.
You might not be hearing this podcast until much later than that, but yes, I will be getting confirmed then. So, is it my turn?
Yes, it is yours.
Okay.
Yes, I think this is, you come from this from a very different perspective. So this is interesting.
Yeah. So I think it is interesting, and always difficult sharing conversion stories, especially into a microphone, because you don't know who is listening. But I feel like I've gotten pretty good at it, because like you said, so many people have been asking, why did you do this? What made you want to do this? And it has been across the board for me. My atheist friends, my agnostic friends, my Protestant friends, my Catholic friends, all these people I continue to meet and have known have been asking me, what is this? Why this sudden change? Well, I think the first thing to state is that it certainly wasn't sudden. It may have appeared sudden to many people, but it was a series of steps. It was a gradual process for the both of us over time. A lot of things may have happened very quickly, but it wasn't just it wasn't an impulse buy.
No, I think the conclusion came quickly, but the groundwork was being laid for years.
Yeah.
And we really went to the depths of some pretty, dismal thought patterns before we came out of it.
We'll get to the dismal stuff. It's my favorite place to go. My background is philosophy. I've always been a student of philosophy, a lover of philosophy, and it was I don't want to say it was philosophy that originally brought me out of the church. I had many reasons for leaving the church when I was younger. I didn't understand it. I thought it was boring. I thought it was filled with hypocrites. Your typical objections for people, for why people leave. Not just Catholicism, but any religion. I thought that it was at odds with certain empirical facts about the world, et cetera, et cetera. But then when I started studying philosophy, I started off with a lot of the existentialist atheist philosophers, Nietzsche and Camus and Sartre and all them. And so if anything, they just deepened my conviction against religion. But it was actually the study of philosophy that eventually brought me back to the church and into the church, because the implications of atheism, when you fully understand them, I believe, are entirely unlivable. Now, just because something is unlivable doesn't mean that it's wrong. You could have an unlivable, miserable existence. So you have to weigh the evidence on its own. But if something is so totally unlivable, what do I mean by that? I mean, if you believe that God does not exist and nature is all there is, it means that there is really no value, meaning significance or purpose to life at all. No, you might have a sense that there is, but you're on a totally naturalistic atheistic worldview, which I held. Those things are merely helpful illusions, probably more better stated as delusions. And if there was one thing I was going to do as a philosopher, it was refusing to hold on to any delusions at all, especially since back in the atheist days, I would always accuse religious people of holding on to a delusion. So if the idea of meaning or significance was a delusion, well, then I had to shake that off as well. So, yeah, I mean, atheism, if you're consistent with it, leads to a very unhappy, nihilistic view of the world. To the extent you're inconsistent with it, sure, you can be happy as an atheist. I'm not saying that atheists have to be nihilists or that they can't be good or moral people. It's just when you study the ontology of it, if you will, you'll see that it is inevitably nihilistic. So that was not very fun.
No.
And it makes you reconsider some things, because if certain conclusions are so unbearable, so unlivable, if they rebel against everything that is a probably basic belief, as they say in philosophy, something that just seems so obviously true. It seems so obviously true that morals exist. It seems so obviously true that certain things have purpose and certain things have significance. And when things seem so obviously true and your whole world philosophy is saying otherwise, that's when you need to go back and reconsider some of the arguments. And that's what I did. And that's when I found many of I came to Aristotle first and kind of heard for the first time his unmoved mover argument for the existence of God. And I thought, that's pretty decent. I've never really heard that argument before. And interestingly enough, in my studies of the other philosophers, I never even seemed to engage much with these types of arguments. And then after him came Thomas Aquinas. And Aquinas was really the one who convicted me of the existence of God, of the God of the philosophers, who really kind of pulled me out of my atheistic framework, so to speak. And I'm going to truncate the story here because I'm sure that we'll talk more about the details at some point. But once you get to the idea that there is a God and it is one God in principle, it's a monotheism, that kind of narrows the scope. You don't have all that many religions. I mean, there's three big or major monotheistic religions. There's Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And one of them makes a pretty big claim. I mean, they all make claims, of course, but one of them actually claims that God himself came down to earth. He was actually became incarnate, the Son of God, if we're trying to be specific, and he died for our sins. Now that is quite a claim. So for me, I wanted to go after that. I wanted to investigate that, and that's when I really began to study. I believe as fairly and objectively as I could, because I had no particular dog in the fight at the time, the historical evidence around Jesus Christ and for his resurrection. And again, to truncate the story, and we can present the case more fully perhaps in future episodes. This is your podcast, by the way. I was convinced that any explanation around the facts around Jesus that explain what the vast majority of scholars know about Jesus, the only thing that could explain those facts between his the post-mortem appearances, the empty tomb, the crucifixion, was in fact the resurrection hypothesis. So it was really purely through reason and philosophy that I came to accept that Christianity, something like mere Christianity, was true. And that's when I was able to kind of take that leap of faith. And the point that I always make on my podcast is faith is beyond reason. It's not below reason. It's on the far side of it. Reason takes you to a certain point. It gives you permission, rational permission, to make that leap. And I did an episode on this not too long ago. A faith is really just trusting in that which you have good reason to believe. And then when I took that trust of faith, for the first time in however long, I can't even remember, I prayed and I said, just God, I believe it. Just help me figure out what I am supposed to do, what the truth is. And to abbreviate the story a little bit further, of course, I looked into all the different various denominations of Christianity. Catholicism made the most sense to me. I studied all the arguments of both sides, but mostly there was just this tugging and this pulling, as Christine hinted at. And I remember one night, this is when we were still going to a Lutheran church, I just felt so compelled. This was Christmas Eve, to go to a Catholic Mass. And I was so moved by the homily and just the presence of the Eucharist, that I just knew that this was it. And then eventually it was. That became it. And that is the short version of my story. From
an altar server, a former altar server, to atheist, to evangelizing Catholic.
That is exactly the path. Yeah, I did altar serve as a boy. I used to ring the bell during the transubstantiation, even though I had no idea what the heck was going on at the time.
And I didn't either. I remember being in church with a friend of mine. I heard the bell. I was like, "What is this? Mm-hmm. What's the bell?" And now I hear the bell, and it's chills. It's so incredible what's actually happening. And of course, if you don't understand, if you weren't given. If you're given just a pop culture view of Catholics, whether it's confession, or
love confession,
I really do. Every time I go, I've been crying, but they're happy tears. I walk out, I feel so relieved. And I think as a mom, you bear the weight of everything. You bear the weight of each child individually, your spouse, you bear the weight of the household, and just the relationships. You were as the mother of the family. Just everything.
You're the rock. I admit it. You are the rock of the household.
Well, it's a rock. And then also I read a book, and actually this is when I picked up the book, it was about a type of homeschooling. And I picked up the book, and this is about a year or so ago, and definitely not thinking religiously at this point. And the author kept, just so naturally talked about God within the context of the book. And the one thing that really stuck out and has really helped me, I think about it occasionally, is that as parents, we are the servants and the shepherds of the family. Mm-hmm. So we serve and we corral. But it is so, it weighs heavily on the person who is managing not only the relationship that they have between themselves and the child, but also between children, between the dog, whatever it is, paying bills. And just to be able to walk into the confessional and own up to the fact that you didn't quite hit the mark this week, and hear that absolution is just wonderful. I walk out of there feeling amazing. And I sit in the pews and I pray for a few minutes before leaving. It's been a game changer. Go to confession.
Yeah, go as soon as you're done with this, go to confession.
Well, it's not even that. It's once I heard that it's called reconciliation. What a beautiful thing! It's not just confessing to some priest who is the key holder or the gatekeeper to heaven, or whatever it is.
Part of the body of Christ.
Yeah,
the whole communion. I think it was Fulton Sheen who said it. That there's not 100 people in America who hate the Catholic Church, but there's millions of people who hate what they think is the Catholic Church. And I was one of those people. Is pretty much everything that I disliked about Catholicism, and even beyond that into Christianity in general, was based off of a severe misunderstanding.
Absolutely.
An absolute caricature of that. Whose fault is that? Well, it's certainly mine for ignoring it to an extent. It's my parents didn't really try to give me any proper religious education either. And even when I was in the church, I remember going to Sunday school, and again, this might be more of my fault than anybody else. Maybe we were learning good things at Sunday school, and I was just too busy, my mind on other such things. So I can't really say, right? But what I can say is that when you take the time to understand what the church actually teaches, the history of the church, the philosophy behind the church, and Christianity isn't a philosophy at heart. It has rich, deep philosophical traditions, but it's a religion about communion. It's understood that religion, it is about a relationship with God fundamentally before anything else. I never understood that until now, but having now understood that, it has changed everything for me.
It's wonderful.
And go to confession.
And go to confession. As far as the caricature goes, it's funny. I would get annoyed by the pomp and circumstance of what I felt was pomp and circumstance of the Mass. Why the bell? Why are they ringing bells? Why is it so important? Or if the Eucharist falls on the floor, what does it matter? What does it matter?
It's just a piece of bread.
It's just a piece of bread. Yeah, get over it, relax. Yeah. But at the same time, I came of age during, I grew up in the Bible Belt, so I think my experiences may be from yours, maybe in the Midwest or Northeast of the country. But WWJD bracelets were everywhere. They're trying to make Jesus very cool and hip. And, I'd go to churches that were in old movie theaters, and they'd shoot T-shirts out of a shirt gun to the crowd, and mood lighting. And so I would feel like, I'd be a little annoyed by the Catholic Church, which I felt was too serious. But then again, I just didn't understand the beauty of it. And the meaning behind it. So now I totally get it. I'm totally on board. And at the other end, though, I didn't like how relaxed the Protestant experience I had from when I was going with friends to churches. It was very off-putting that, what is this? Is Jesus cool? Is he just this nice, like Barney purple dinosaur kind of character? And through the studies, though, to see that, and I never, I'd hear, oh, Jesus died for your sins. I'm like, what does that mean? What do you mean died for my sins? In the studies, though, now that I've worked my way through a good chunk of the Old Testament, I read the Bible. I get up very early every morning so I can do my studies before all the children wake up. But I've gotten through a good chunk of the Old Testament and reading it next to the New. It's so powerful. And I do understand that there was red in our ledger, and he came and wiped it out for us. It's very powerful stuff. It's stuff that I never would have understood growing up. And again, it's my fault. I didn't bother, but the environment too wasn't helpful either.
Sure, yeah. But at the same time, we did eventually respond to the grace, and here we are. So that's ultimately what matters. And I just want to go back to the point about the WWJD bracelets, and not to pick on those specifically, but I do remember there was a certain crowd, even in my high school in the Midwest, who they were trying to kind of turn Jesus into like let's just say a politically correct figure, some hip guy who is kind of like this very inclusive spiritual sage, more or less. But what I learned when I actually studied the historical Jesus and actually read the Bible was that if you make Jesus politically correct, you make him historically incorrect. He was not just some cool, hip, spiritual sage. He wasn't like an Eckhart Tolle or a Deepak Chopra by any means.
Nobody would have wanted to kill him.
Well, that's true. Or other reasons. But I mean, you can just read what he said, and you would see that he was quite a radical. And this was part of the famous trilemma that C.S. Lewis presented: is that either you don't have much of an option when it comes to Jesus when you really investigate him. Either the man was who he said he was, or he was some type of lunatic, or very improbably he was a liar. But you can't think of any conceivable reason of why he would lie about the things he lied about. So either he was really insane, or there might have been something to him. And then that question alone was kind of the prompting question for me to investigate that, because I'm like, oh yeah, he didn't really leave the option here as just some kind of cool spiritual sage. He wasn't claiming to be like a Buddha or something. He was saying, I am the Son of God. Nobody comes to the Father unless it is through me. He was saying extremely radical things, not inclusive at all. I mean, inclusive in the sense like anybody could come to him, but very, very particular, very, very peculiar. So I very much now am hesitant in any way to give any credence to people who try to make Jesus into some type of new age spiritual teacher. He's definitely anything but that. And it was because he was anything but that made me want to look into him. It was the sheer radicality of the nature of Jesus that made me so curious to want to really research it and press it. If he was just some sage among sages, I probably wouldn't have been that interested. It would have been easier to write him off, but he didn't leave that option open.
Yes.
Very good. This is the Catholic Mama.
This is the Catholic Mama.
It's hit for dads too, though. Yeah,
it's a Catholic family. You're here. You're a dad. You're a Catholic dad.
Whenever you invite me on.
Yes. Well, it shouldn't be hard to find you. You won't leave the house. No. And I gotta say, through this journey, it's been months long. Well, the nihilism was a while. That was a few years, and we started slowly coming out of it. And I remember being very confused because you said something at one point, some philosophical something to me, and then I don't remember what it is now, but maybe a year or two later, you said something in direct opposition on it. And I thought to myself, what's going on here? I didn't know that you were doing this sort of research. Right? You just read so voraciously.
Clandestine.
Yes. You read so much. I can't keep up with, I just know that Amazon packages come to the house almost daily and there's a new book in there for you. And I know you're reading all of them. You're not just a collector. And I was just very surprised all of a sudden to hear something so different come out. I'm a Taurus. If there's any credence to astrological signs, which means I'm stubborn and it's hard for me to make changes. But this one felt right. It is right. So we were pushed and pulled.
I remember the thing that you did that I thought was really sincere and useful and interesting. And I don't want that to be missed. Is you can correct the details, but you said, what do I have to lose? Let me just try it for 30 days. That's
right. I forgot about that. Yeah. So about a year ago, maybe, I don't remember where I saw this, but I saw something that said, what if you became a true believer for 1 month? And I thought to myself, it's interesting. And it kept tugging at me. And then because, I'm stubborn, I thought to myself, what's a month? If I realize this is all silliness, it's meaningless, it's wrong, I wasted a month of my life, maybe I don't tell anybody that I'm doing this really. I'll just research on my own. But then I realized if I was going to be a true believer, if somebody happened to ask me in the meantime, in that 30 days, if I was Christian, I would have to say yes, because I was, not fake it till you make it, but it was.
It kind of can be.
Yeah, kind of. Just let's see where this goes. What do I have to lose? And I had a lot to gain and nothing to lose. Well, my lack of faith, I lost that. And our marriage has gotten better. I've been a better parent. I've been a better friend. I've been accused in the past of being very icy and unforgiving, and I don't believe that's the case anymore. I've tried very hard, but it's been easier. It's been easier for me, a person who is more stubborn and has somewhat of a block, maybe controlling. I don't know. Don't answer that, Pat. Don't talk about that.
I need some material for confession.
That's
been good this week.
Yeah, sure. It became so easy once I realized that I am a Christian. It's so easy just to let all that other baggage fall away. What does it matter? None of this matters. The way I was, if I had been stubborn for 30 years, it doesn't matter. Not anymore. What matters is that I'm now a Christian and I live a Christian lifestyle. So I have let go of grudges. I have been nicer and kinder. Things that I didn't think I was really that bad at anyway. But once I became a Christian, I realized that I was falling short in a lot of ways. And there's a path now that I can walk and have structure, and it's made everything better. Life has been better. Yes,
I will absolutely attest to that. And I'm glad that that we didn't forget that one little detail, because I think there's something interesting about our conversion stories. Even though we both came at it from very different angles, I think that especially together, they've complemented each other. You've filled gaps for me. Maybe I've filled gaps for you.
You've watered down, or not watered down, I should say. You have made philosophy much more accessible than I would have been able to understand. So that has been very helpful.
And I think it's important to realize, and this is why I really am excited about you doing this podcast, is I know that my path will be appealing to some people, but not everybody has philosophical or scientific holdups about religion or things like that. It might be more of emotional holdups, even spiritual holdups. So I think when it comes to either deepening your own faith or evangelizing, it pays to have a series of apologetic tools in your toolkit, if you will. And I know what I'm good at. I think you're better at a lot of other things. For example, when you first started doing that 30-day experiment, I was, I wish I would have thought of that. That's a really, because again, what do you have to lose to just fake it till you make it for 30 days? Just try it. What can it really hurt to give it a really sincere effort? And I just thought that was, I just thought that was great.
I'm glad I did it. And so here we are today because of that, and because of all of our studies. And the fact that we didn't let our preconceived notions stop us from doing something profoundly correct.
Yes, and I don't want to make it seem like we were so open-minded. We both had a long series of objections and obstacles along the way, that it was not a completely open door. But we were able to overcome those objections and obstacles and obviously eventually arrive there. But there was no shortage of prejudices that we both had.
Absolutely. But I think, I'm susceptible to reason. So once the reason was there and I could understand it, it made perfect sense. Mm-hmm. And also the grace of God.
Yeah, and we can't forget that. And I always try
This is not a journey that we just happened to find ourselves. We were pulled and pushed and tugged, and I think our hearts were opened by. Yeah,
the Spirit is ultimately, I don't want to say to blame. I mean, that's negative connotation. To thank for all of this. And the Spirit works in different ways. I think for me, it certainly worked through providing me with the reasons, the philosophical arguments that I needed to overcome my objections. And for other people, it works through other means. It knows what it needs to do to get people's attention. So it is important to remember that it is God's grace fundamentally at work. And I try to remember that myself when I'm offering reasons and arguments for the faith. But that doesn't mean you don't offer reasons and arguments for the faith. You could be one of the most important agents that God's grace is using to bring other people into the church. And
yeah, I remember reading somewhere some saying. I probably saw it on Pinterest. To be honest, it's probably where I saw this. But it said if you just say thanks and you've said enough, or something like that. If you just thank God, then that's a good enough prayer. And at the beginning of all this, I said that a lot. Just thank you for bringing me back. Realizing what I've been missing these years of feeling, just a general sadness when I would think, especially after our kids were born. I felt like, there's nothing. There's just this world that just happened to happen. What does it matter? But then this love that I felt for my children was at complete odds with this other very dismal view. Mm-hmm. It's just made everything so much fuller. And so I've said thank you many, many times, over and over again. And now I'm saying, Jesus, I trust in you a lot as I'm learning about divine mercy. But it's in the heart of it, there's always a thank you. Thank you, God, for showing me the way, bringing me back, and showing how many other countless people this as well. Mm-hmm. We can hope that we all move toward something nicer than what a lot of this world or the news will have you believe is happening in the world.
And that's our story.
So
we're sticking to it.
Yes. And speaking of thanks, thank you all for listening to our first episode of The Catholic Mama.
And dads, too. Don't be embarrassed to put on The Catholic Mama for your friends.
That's right. Put it on the car. Listen to it with your kids.
Right. Yeah. Dads, you should be the first ones to subscribe to The Catholic Mama. I'll offer the challenge to the dads right now who are listening. If you're in the car, pull up the phone, hit that little subscribe button.
And moms. Everybody do it. Thank you guys so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed. It might be me talking on my own some days, but Pat and I do live in the same house, so he may be joining us more. And I think it's great to hear your perspective. So thank you. You've been integral in getting me on this path and keeping me there. So thank you.
Thanks for inviting me.
Just so much gratitude.
No, seriously, folks, thank you so much. If you come from my show, thank you for coming over and listening to this one. My wife is a wonderful person. She really, really is. And she can offer a very unique, fresh perspective that I think very much complements mine if you've been listening to me, and will appeal to a lot of people in ways that I feel that I just am not as capable of doing. So I think I'm very glad you're doing this. And again, thank you for listening.
Thank you. Don't forget to head over to thecatholicmama.com to get your free copy of How to Talk to Your Kids About God. This handy little ebook will teach you how to broach the topic of God with your children, or how to respond to your kids when they want to talk about God. as well as give you answers to 7 of the trickiest questions about the faith that Christian parents face. You'll love the easy-to-understand grown-up answers, the pared-down but not talked-down answers you can share with your kids, plus recommended resources if you'd like to deepen your understanding of the topic. Get yours free at thecatholicmama.com.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.